Date, I donated my kidney to my sister. Then I found out my DNA was faked. I gave my sister my kidney. 18 months later, I found out the DNA test that proved we were a match had been falsified, and the person who falsified it was my mother. My name is Ethan Cole, and for 24 years, I believed I had a sister named Lily. I believed we shared parents. I believed we shared a childhood. I believed we shared blood, literally as it turned out, or so I was told. I want to start by saying that Lily is not the villain of this story. Lily was sick, Lily needed help, and Lily, I later learned, had no idea what was done in her name. The villain of this story is harder to talk about, because the villain is the woman who raised me. I was 23 when Lily got sick. She was 26, 3 years older than me, sharp-tongued and warm-hearted in equal measure, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and forgot to eat lunch. We'd always been close, closer than most siblings, people said. The kind of close where you finish each other's sentences and argue about nothing because the arguing is just another form of being together. When the doctors told us Lily's kidneys were failing, our family went into a kind of organized panic. The type of panic that looks calm on the outside because everyone has something to do. My father researched specialists. My mother coordinated appointments. I filled out the donor evaluation forms before anyone asked me to. I was healthy. I was young. I was her brother. Of course I was going to be tested. The preliminary blood typing came back compatible. Then the tissue matching. Then the formal cross-match. Each test came back green, and each time it did, my mother cried with relief. My father shook my hand in a way that felt like more than a handshake. The transplant surgery took place on a Thursday in March. It went well. Lily recovered. Not instantly. Kidney transplants aren't magic, and the months that followed were hard. But she recovered. Fully, eventually. She went back to her apartment. She went back to her job. She started running again, which she'd given up 2 years before when her energy disappeared. I watched her cross a 5K finish line 8 months after the surgery. I cried. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I had given her something real, something permanent, something that couldn't be taken back, or devalued, or forgotten. Or so I thought. The DNA kit was a Christmas gift. My girlfriend at the time, Maya, had bought us both 23andMe kits as a kind of joke. Let's find out if you have any secret Viking ancestry kind of gift. We were that age where everyone was doing it. Half our friends had already spit in the tubes and were texting each other about unexpected Scandinavian heritage. I did mine in January, mailed it, forgot about it for 6 weeks. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work. I opened the app on my phone during my lunch break, expecting percentages of European ancestry and maybe a cousin I'd never heard of. What I found instead was something that didn't make sense. The ethnicity breakdown was different from what I'd expected. Different enough to pause on, but not alarming on its own. What was alarming was the DNA relatives section. My parents showed up. Distant matches, the kind of percentage you'd expect from second or third cousins, but recognizable names. My father's side of the family had done tests too, apparently, and the matches were there. Lily wasn't there. I told myself it was a glitch. I told myself the app was imperfect, that consumer DNA tests had margins of error, that half-siblings sometimes showed up differently than expected. I closed the app and went back to work, but I opened it again that night. And the night after, I called 23andMe's customer support. I explained the situation, that I'd recently been a living kidney donor for my sister, that we had been medically confirmed as compatible, and that she wasn't showing up as a DNA relative. The representative was careful. She explained that sibling relationships should show up clearly in their system, typically 45 to 50% shared DNA for full siblings. She asked if I wanted to flag the account for review. I said yes. 3 days later, I received an email confirming my results were accurate. Lily and I shared no detectable DNA. We were not biological siblings. I want to describe what it feels like to read something like that, but I'm not sure language is adequate for it. It's not like grief exactly, it's more like the floor tilting. Like every memory you have suddenly has a question mark attached to it. Every Christmas morning. Every argument over the remote control. Every time she called you her little brother in that tone that was half affectionate and half insufferable. All of it suddenly floating, untethered, waiting for an explanation. I didn't call Lily. I didn't call my father. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. She was in a good mood. I could hear it in her voice. She'd been to yoga. She was making dinner. I told her what the DNA test had shown. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. I counted. Then she said, "Those tests aren't always accurate, Ethan." And something in her voice, something very small, something she almost managed to hide, told me everything I needed to know. I said, "Mom, tell me the truth." Another silence. And then she said, "Come home." I drove 3 hours that night. My father wasn't there. She'd asked him to go to my uncle's, which told me she had known this moment might come, that she had, on some level, prepared for it. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table I'd done homework at, the same table we'd eaten 1,000 dinners at, and she told me. She told me everything. The short version is this. Lily and I are not biological siblings. Lily is my mother's biological daughter from her first marriage, a marriage that ended before I was born, a marriage my mother had largely erased from the story she told about her own life. I was adopted, privately, at 3 months old. My biological parents were a young couple who couldn't provide for me. Nothing dramatic, nothing dark. Just young and unprepared, and according to the paperwork my mother eventually showed me, certain that giving me up was the kindest thing they could do. My father, the man I called my father, knew, had always known. Lily did not know, had never been told. I processed that. Then, I asked the question I'd driven 3 hours to ask. What about the donor matching? The tissue typing? The cross-match? How are Lily and I compatible if we share no DNA? My mother looked at the table, and she told me the rest. The transplant coordinator at the hospital, a woman named Patricia, who had worked with my mother for 11 years through a patient advocacy organization, had helped falsify the documentation. Not the medical tests themselves, the preliminary paperwork, the family relationship attestation, the documents that established me as Lily's biological brother, and therefore moved me to the front of the donor evaluation line. Here's the thing about kidney donation that most people don't know. You don't have to be related to donate. Living donation between unrelated individuals happens regularly. Compatibility is medical, not genealogical. But related donors get prioritized. Related donors move faster through the process. And in the desperate, terrifying early days of Lily's diagnosis, when the waiting list stretched years into an uncertain future, my mother had made a calculation. She had decided that the end, saving Lily's life, justified the means. She had decided that I would agree to donate anyway, so the deception caused no real harm. She had decided that I never needed to know. I want to be fair to my mother, even now, because I think fairness is something I owe to the truth, even when the truth is hard. She was watching her daughter die. She was terrified. She was not a calculating, cold person who weighed options dispassionately. She was a mother who was losing her child and grabbed the nearest lifeline with both hands. I understand that, I do. But here's what she didn't consider, or considered and dismissed. She made a medical decision on my behalf without my knowledge. She allowed me to believe I was donating to a biological sister when I was donating to a legal sister, which is a different kind of decision. Not lesser, but different. A decision I deserve to make with complete information. She removed my informed consent. And that, not the adoption, not the hidden history, not even the deception itself, is what I couldn't move past. I didn't speak to my mother for 4 months. I told Lily everything. That conversation was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the surgery, harder than the drive home that night, harder than sitting across from my mother at that kitchen table. Because Lily had no idea about any of it. Not about my adoption, not about the falsified paperwork, not about what had been done in her name to save her life without her knowledge or permission. She cried for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said, "I would have wanted you to know. I would have wanted you to choose." I said, "I know." She said, "Would you have done it? If you'd known the truth?" I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said. "You're my sister. DNA doesn't change that." She reached across the table and took my hand. We sat there for a long time without saying anything else. The hospital launched an internal review. Patricia, the transplant coordinator, resigned before the process concluded. There were discussions of legal action, conversations I was peripherally involved in and mostly wanted no part of. My mother was not charged with anything. The legal landscape around living donor paperwork is complicated, and the transplant itself had been medically successful. No one had been harmed in the way the law recognizes harm, except me. And I'm still working out how to quantify that. I found my biological parents. That part of the story, which could be its own telling, went better than I feared and stranger than I expected. A couple in their mid-40s now, married to other people, each with other children. Each, when I reached out, immediately willing to talk. My biological mother cried on the phone. She said she'd thought about me every year on my birthday. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't, entirely. But I'm learning. My relationship with the woman who raised me is rebuilt, partially, imperfectly, with load-bearing cracks that we've learned to work around. She apologized. A real apology, not the kind that is actually a defense, not the kind that ends with, "But I did what I had to do." A genuine, stripped-down acknowledgement that she had wronged me, that she had made a choice that wasn't hers to make. It took her a while to get there, but she got there. My father, who had known about the adoption but not about the falsified donor paperwork, had his own reckoning to face. That process is ongoing. And Lily is healthy. Lily is running. Lily calls me every Sunday. Last month, she called me on my birthday. My actual birthday, the one she's always known. And she said, "Happy birthday, little brother." Same tone, half affectionate, half insufferable. I laughed until I almost couldn't breathe. People ask me sometimes whether I regret the donation. Here's my answer. I regret the lie. I regret that the choice was taken from me. I regret that for 18 months I celebrated something. That surgery, that recovery, that finish line, on false terms. But the kidney? No, I don't regret the kidney. Because Lily is alive, and she's my sister. That's not DNA. That's 24 years of shared life, of arguments and phone calls and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays, of someone who knows you completely and loves you anyway. You don't need a test to tell you what that is. My name is Ethan Cole. I donated my kidney to my sister, and I'd do it again. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that family is more than biology. Subscribe for new stories every day. See you next time.